Ilara Quinn didn't slam the door. That was the first thing she noticed later. The silence. No shouting, no broken glass, no dramatic goodbye. Just the quiet click of a lock that sounded final in a way nothing else ever had. But everything had already ended before that. It ended in the kitchen. The apartment sat high above the Upper East Side, wrapped in glass and soft yellow lighting that made everything look warmer than it really was. The kind of place people envied. The kind of place that looked like stability. Ilara stood barefoot on the marble floor, one hand resting under the curve of her 7-month belly. The other held a folded ultrasound photo, edges slightly bent from how tightly she'd been gripping it. On the counter beside her, a cup of Starbucks had gone cold. Marcus stood across from her, loosening his tie, his Rolex catching the light as he dropped his keys next to his iPhone. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that asked for comfort, the kind that pushed people away. "You missed the appointment," Ilara said quietly, not accusing, not angry, just stating something that mattered. Marcus exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I told you I had a client dinner." "It was our daughter's scan," she replied, her voice still calm. "They said everything looks good. I thought you'd want to hear that from me." "I'm hearing it now, aren't I?" he said, already reaching for a glass of water. Something inside her shifted. Not broken, not yet. Just moved. "I needed you there," she said softly. That made him pause. For a second. Then he turned. And the look in his eyes wasn't anger. It was something colder. Something distant. "Do you know what this feels like?" Marcus said, his voice low but sharp. "Every day lately feels like I'm carrying something I didn't plan for." Ilara blinked. "I didn't plan this alone," she said, almost whispering. "That's not what I meant," he snapped. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, unfamiliar, dangerous. He leaned against the counter, shaking his head like he was trying to push something away. "No," he said, quieter now. "Actually, maybe it is." Her fingers tightened slightly around the ultrasound photo. "Marcus." But he didn't stop. "Ever since this pregnancy started," he continued, "everything in my life has felt heavier." The word landed. Heavier. Not beautiful, not meaningful, not life-changing. Just heavier. Ilara felt the air leave her chest. Still, she didn't cry. Not yet. She just looked at him. Really looked. As if trying to find the man she married somewhere behind the one standing in front of her. "And me?" she asked. A small question, but it carried everything. Marcus didn't hesitate. That was the part that would stay with her forever. "Maybe you should stop acting like this baby makes you untouchable." Silence. Total. Absolute. Even the city outside, the distant hum of traffic, the faint echo of sirens, seemed to disappear. Ilara didn't move, because in that moment, something inside her didn't shatter. It went still. Completely still. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Clarity. Slowly, she placed the ultrasound photo down on the counter, right beside his phone, right beside the life she thought they were building. "I never thought I was untouchable," she said quietly. A pause. Then, "I just thought I was your family." Marcus didn't respond. Didn't reach for her. Didn't take it back. And that told her everything. Ilara turned, walked toward the bedroom. No rush, no panic. She picked up her coat, her bag, her medical folder. The small things that suddenly meant survival. When she came back, Marcus was still standing in the same spot. Like none of it had fully registered. "Ilara, don't overreact," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "You're emotional. We can talk about this tomorrow." She looked at him one last time, and for the first time, she didn't recognize him. I won't be here tomorrow, she said. Then she walked past him, opened the door, and stepped out. No slam, just that soft final click. Down the hallway, into the elevator. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls, pale, quiet, 7 months pregnant, and completely alone. Her phone buzzed in her bag. Marcus. Calling. Again. And again. Ilara didn't answer, because deep down, she knew something he didn't. She wasn't just leaving for the night. She was walking away from a life that was already gone. Ilara didn't remember how long she sat there. The Starbucks near Grand Central was half full, the soft hum of conversations blending with the hiss of steaming milk behind the counter. People came and went, coats brushing past her, phones pressed to ears, lives continuing as if nothing had shifted. But for her, everything had. She sat by the window, one hand wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold, the other resting protectively over her stomach. Her reflection stared back faintly in the glass, layered over the blur of city lights outside. 7 months pregnant. Alone. Her iPhone buzzed again on the table. Marcus. Call after call. Then a message. Where are you? Another. Stop this. Come home. She flipped the phone over without reading the rest. Not out of anger, but because something inside her had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a truth you can't unhear. A couple walked in, laughing softly, the man placing a hand on the woman's back as they moved toward the counter. The small gesture hit harder than anything Marcus had said. Not because it was big, but because it was natural. Unforced. Real. Ilara swallowed, her throat tightening, but no tears came. Not yet. Her mind replayed his words again. Heavier. Untouchable. Each one settled deeper now, like something sinking into place instead of floating in shock. She reached into her bag slowly, pulling out the ultrasound photo. The edges were creased now, and the image slightly blurred from how tightly she had held it earlier. My baby, she whispered under her breath. Not our baby. Not anymore. The thought didn't break her. It steadied her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a different name. Talia. Ilara hesitated for a second before answering. Hey. Her voice came out softer than she expected. You don't sound okay, Talia said immediately. No hesitation. No small talk. Ilara closed her eyes for a brief moment. I left, she said. Silence on the other end. Then, where are you? Grand Central. Starbucks. I'm coming, don't move. The line went dead before Ilara could respond. She sat there, staring at nothing, listening to the rhythm of the city around her. For the first time that night, she let herself breathe. Slow, careful, like every inhale mattered more than before. Because now it did. 20 minutes later, a worn Toyota pulled up outside. Talia stepped out, scanning the sidewalk until her eyes landed on Ilara through the glass. She didn't rush in dramatically. She just walked inside, steady, grounded. When she reached the table, she didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. She simply placed a bottle of water in front of Ilara and said quietly, "Let's get you somewhere safe." That was it. No judgment. No pressure. Just presence. And for the first time since she walked out of that apartment, Ilara felt something shift. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. She stood slowly, grabbing her bag, leaving the untouched coffee behind. As they stepped out into the cold night air, her phone buzzed again in her pocket. Marcus. Still calling, still trying to reach her. But Ilara didn't take it out. Because deep down, she already knew something he hadn't realized yet. This time, she wasn't coming back. By the third day, Ilara realized something was wrong. Not with her. With the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't healing. It was controlled. She sat on Talia's couch in Brooklyn Heights, wrapped in a soft gray blanket, her bare feet tucked under her. The morning light filtered through the window, gentle and warm, but it didn't reach her. Her iPhone rested beside her, screen dark now. Marcus had stopped calling. That should have felt like relief. It didn't. It felt calculated. Talia moved quietly in the small kitchen, the sound of a kettle beginning to hum. She didn't ask questions, didn't push. Just let Alara exist in the space between shock and understanding. That space didn't last long. Her phone lit up again. Not Marcus. Unknown number? Alara hesitated, then answered. Hello? Alara. The voice was familiar, polished, careful. It was Diane, Marcus's mother. Alara straightened slightly. Hi. A pause. Then, I heard you left, Diane said, her tone calm but not warm. Alara's fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. You shouldn't have done that, Diane continued softly. Marcus is under a lot of pressure right now. The words landed strangely. Not concern. Not curiosity. A statement. He told me you've been overwhelmed, Diane added. That things have been difficult for you emotionally. Alara blinked. I'm pregnant, she said quietly. That's not the same thing. I understand that, Diane replied quickly. But leaving like this, it puts him in a very difficult position. Him, not them, not her, not the baby. Alara felt something shift again. Slow, clear. What exactly did he say? She asked. Silence. Then, that you've been struggling, Diane said carefully, that you needed space, that you weren't thinking clearly. Alara looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. That surprised her, because something inside her had already started connecting the pieces. He said I wasn't thinking clearly, she repeated. Yes, Diane answered gently. He's worried about you. That word again. Worried. It sounded kind, but it felt like something else, like a setup. Alara exhaled slowly. I left because of what he said, she replied. Not because I'm unstable. Another pause, but this one felt different. Less certain. Well, Diane said after a moment, these things can be complicated. Complicated? Alara almost smiled. And because suddenly, it wasn't. It was simple. Marcus hadn't just let her leave. He had already started telling the story, and in his version, she wasn't a woman who walked away. She was a woman who couldn't stay. The call ended shortly after. No resolution, no understanding, just distance. Alara placed the phone down beside her and leaned back against the couch. The room felt smaller now, not because of the space, but because the truth had taken up more of it. Talia stepped in quietly, placing a cup of tea in front of her. Alara looked up. He's telling people I'm unstable, she said. Talia didn't look surprised. She just nodded once. Of course he is. Alara frowned slightly. You don't think that's extreme? Talia met her eyes. I think, she said calmly, that people who lose control of a situation usually try to control the narrative instead. The words settled in, heavy, accurate. Alara looked down at her stomach, her hand resting there instinctively. For a moment she said nothing. Then softly, I don't even recognize the story he's telling. Talia didn't respond right away. She just leaned against the counter, arms folded. Then don't live in it, she said. Simple, direct, real. Alara nodded slowly, because for the first time, she understood what was happening. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. It was about something else entirely. Something quieter, more dangerous. Because somewhere, while she was trying to survive, Marcus was rewriting everything. And if she stayed silent, that version would become the truth. Alara picked up her phone again. Not to call him. Not to defend herself. Just to look at the screen. To remind herself what was real. Then she locked it. Set it down. And leaned back, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Because now, she wasn't just dealing with what he said, she was dealing with what he was building. And she had no idea how far he had already gone. The pain didn't start loudly. It began as a tight pull low in Alara's abdomen. Sharp, then gone. Like something testing the edge of breaking. She was standing in Talia's kitchen, one hand resting against the counter, the other pressing instinctively against her stomach. "Hey." Talia glanced up from the sink. "You okay?" Alara nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." But the second wave hit harder. It stole her breath. Her fingers gripped the marble edge, knuckles whitening as her body bent slightly forward. "No, not now. Not like this." "It's too early," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Talia was already moving. "That's not just tired," she said, grabbing her keys. "We're going." "I can't." Alara shook her head, panic rising fast. "I didn't pack anything. I don't have—" "You have me," Talia cut in, firm. "That's enough. Come on." The ride was a blur. Streetlights streaked past the window as the old Toyota pushed through traffic, the city suddenly louder, harsher, unforgiving. Every bump in the road sent a sharp wave through Alara's body, her breathing turned uneven. Her hand never left her stomach. "Stay with me," Talia said, one hand gripping the wheel, the other reaching over briefly. "Just breathe." Alara nodded, but her vision blurred. Not from tears, from fear, because deep down, she knew something was wrong. By the time they reached New York Presbyterian, Alara could barely stand. The hospital doors slid open, bright fluorescent lights swallowing her whole. The air smelled like antiseptic and urgency, voices, questions, forms. 7 months pregnant, Talia answered quickly. Pain started suddenly. Alara was placed into a wheelchair before she could argue. Everything moved too fast, and somehow, not fast enough. Hours blurred together in fragments, cold sheets, a monitor beeping too steadily, a nurse adjusting something she couldn't focus on. "You're going into early labor," a doctor said calmly. The words didn't feel real. "No," Alara whispered. "It's too soon." "We're going to take care of you," the doctor replied gently. "But you need to stay calm." Stay calm, the most impossible instruction in the world. Pain surged again, stronger this time, ripping through her body, stealing whatever control she thought she still had. Talia stayed beside her as long as she could, gripping her hand tightly. "You're not alone," she said. But Alara felt it anyway. The absence. The empty space where Marcus should have been. When the pain peaked, Alara cried out, not just from the physical force of it, but from everything she had been holding inside since that night. The fear, the betrayal, the silence. "I can't do this," she gasped. "Yes, you can," a nurse said firmly. "You're stronger than you think." But Alara didn't feel strong. She felt broken, abandoned, terrified. And then, everything shifted. A sharp cry cut through the room. Small, fragile, alive. The world went quiet. They placed the baby in her arms, wrapped tightly, her tiny face pressed gently against Alara's chest. Alara stared down, her breath catching. "My baby," she whispered. Her voice shook, but her hands didn't. Because somehow, in the middle of everything falling apart, this was real. This was hers. No one could rewrite this moment. No one could take it away. Tears finally blurred her vision as she held her daughter closer. And in that moment, she made a promise. Not out loud, not dramatic, just quiet and absolute. No matter what happened next, She would never let this child feel the kind of abandonment she had just survived. Outside the room, her phone sat in her bag. Screen dark. No missed calls. No messages. No Marcus. And as Ilara pressed her lips gently against her daughter's forehead, she realized something that cut deeper than anything he had said. He didn't even know she almost didn't make it. Ilara didn't expect him to come. Not that day. Not after everything. So when the door to her hospital room opened quietly that afternoon, she didn't look up right away. She was sitting upright in the bed, her daughter asleep against her chest, her fingers tracing slow circles along the baby's back. The room was calm now. Soft beeping machines, muted voices in the hallway, a fragile kind of peace. Ilara? Her body stiffened before her mind caught up. That voice. She looked up slowly. Marcus stood just inside the doorway, still in his tailored suit, tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled like he had run his hands through it too many times. His Rolex caught the light again, but something about him felt off, less composed, more unsure. For a moment, neither of them spoke. His eyes dropped to the baby in her arms, and everything in his expression changed. What? He stepped closer, his voice softer now. Is she? She's early, Ilara said quietly. But she's okay. Marcus exhaled, a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief washed over his face. Real, unfiltered. And that made it harder. She's beautiful, he said, almost to himself. Ilara didn't respond. She just watched him, carefully, like she was seeing someone familiar, but no longer safe. Marcus moved closer to the bed, slower this time, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. Can I? He asked, nodding toward the baby. A small pause. Then Ilara shifted slightly, guiding the baby into his arms. He held her awkwardly at first, like something fragile he didn't trust himself not to break. But then his grip steadied, his eyes fixed on her tiny face. That's my daughter, he whispered. Something flickered in Ilara's chest. Not hope, not forgiveness. Just memory of who he used to be. I didn't know, Marcus said after a moment, his voice low. About today, I've been trying to reach you. Ilara's gaze dropped briefly. My phone was off, she said. He nodded slowly. I came as soon as I heard. He sat down beside the bed, still holding the baby, his thumb brushing gently against her small hand. I messed up, he said quietly. The words were simple, familiar, too familiar. Ilara didn't answer right away, because apologies were easy. Timing wasn't. You missed everything, she said finally. Her voice wasn't angry. That made it worse. Marcus swallowed. I know. No. She shook her head slightly. You don't. Silence settled between them again. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Marcus looked down at the baby, then back at Ilara. I want to fix this, he said. I want us to go home. Home. The word felt foreign now. Ilara studied his face. The exhaustion, the regret, the sincerity that might have been real, or just well practiced. She didn't know anymore. I'm not ready for that, she said. Marcus nodded slowly, like he expected resistance. That's okay, he replied. We'll take it step by step. We. Ilara noticed it immediately. He was already speaking like nothing had fully broken, like time could rewind if he said the right things. Her eyes shifted toward the chair beside the bed. His iPhone rested there. The screen lit up briefly. A message. Unknown name. But the preview was enough. Did she sign anything yet? Ilara's breath caught, just for a second. Then she looked back at Marcus, still holding their daughter, still speaking gently, still acting like he had just come back. But something cold settled deep in her chest. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a man trying to fix a family. It felt like a man trying to manage a situation, and as she watched him rock the baby gently in his arms, Ilara realized something far more dangerous than his absence. He had never stopped planning. Ilara didn't react right away. She had learned something in the past few days. Reaction gave people power. So instead of confronting, she simply looked away from Marcus's phone as if she hadn't seen anything at all. Did she sign anything yet? The words echoed quietly in her mind. Not loud, not dramatic, but precise, calculated. Marcus continued rocking their daughter gently, his expression soft, almost peaceful. Anyone walking into that room would see a devoted father, a man trying to make things right. That was the problem. It looked perfect. Too perfect. "What are you thinking?" he asked, glancing up at her. Ilara met his eyes. "Nothing," she said calmly. It wasn't entirely a lie, because what she was feeling wasn't a single thought. It was a slow, creeping understanding. Marcus smiled faintly, like he believed her. "I've been talking to a few people," he said, trying to figure out the best way to stabilize things. Stabilize. Another careful word. Ilara tilted her head slightly. "What does that mean?" "For us," he replied smoothly. "For the baby. For everything moving forward." Her fingers tightened slightly around the hospital blanket. "Does it involve paperwork?" she asked. The question was simple, but it landed. Marcus paused, just for a second. Then he looked back down at the baby, buying himself time. "There are always documents in situations like this," he said casually. "Nothing serious. Just structure." Structure. Ilara felt the word settle in her chest, cold, heavy. "You mean legal structure," she said. Marcus let out a quiet breath, like she was overthinking. "You know how things work," he replied. "It's just to make sure everything is clear. Protected." Protected. From what? From who? Ilara didn't ask, because suddenly, she didn't trust the answers. Instead, she shifted slightly in the bed, her gaze moving toward the window. The late afternoon light stretched across the room, soft and golden, almost peaceful. It didn't match the feeling inside her. "I'm not signing anything," she said quietly. Marcus looked up immediately. "I didn't say you had to, but you're expecting it," she interrupted, her tone still calm. Silence. The kind that reveals more than words ever could. Marcus studied her now. Really studied her. And something in his expression changed. Not guilt, not fear. Awareness. "You've always been smart," he said slowly. Ilara didn't respond, because that wasn't a compliment. It was an adjustment. He was recalculating. "You don't have to make decisions right now," Marcus added, his voice softer again. "You just had a baby. You should focus on recovery." There it was. The shift. Subtle. Strategic. Positioning her as fragile. As someone who shouldn't think too much. Ilara felt it clearly now. Every word. Every tone. Every pause. This wasn't about rebuilding anything. It was about control. And the scariest part? Marcus didn't even sound like a villain. And he sounded reasonable. Measured. Safe. That's what made it dangerous. Ilara looked at her daughter, still asleep in his arms, completely unaware of the tension filling the room. Then she looked back at Marcus. And for the first time since he walked in, she didn't see a husband. She saw a man managing outcomes. Carefully, quietly, deliberately. And somewhere beneath that calm exterior, she knew there was something much bigger she hadn't uncovered yet. Something already in motion. Something she was never supposed to question. Her voice came out softer than expected. "What exactly are you trying to protect, Marcus?" He didn't answer immediately, just held her gaze. Still. Unreadable. Then finally, "Everything that matters," he said. And that was the moment Ilara understood. He wasn't trying to fix what they lost. He was trying to secure what he thought he could still keep. Ilara didn't sleep that night. The hospital room was quiet, dimmed lights casting soft shadows against the walls, her daughter resting beside her in a small bassinet. Every sound felt amplified, the faint beeping of machines, the distant echo of footsteps in the hallway, and the silence between thoughts. She stared at the ceiling, Marcus's words replaying again. Structure. Protection. Everything that matters. None of it sounded like love. It sounded like preparation, careful, intentional. And the message she saw earlier, did she sign anything yet? That wasn't concern. That was a timeline. Ilara turned her head slightly, looking toward the chair where Marcus had sat hours ago. He had left sometime after midnight, saying he needed to handle a few things. Of course he did. He always had something to handle. Her eyes drifted toward her bag. Slowly, she reached for it, pulling out her phone. Then something else. Her old iPad, the one she hadn't used in weeks. It still had access to their shared accounts. At least, it used to. Her fingers hesitated for just a second before she powered it on. The screen lit up. Still connected. A small breath left her chest. She opened the email app. Scrolled. Nothing unusual at first glance. Work messages, bank notifications, routine. Then she searched his name. Marcus. Dozens of threads appeared. She clicked one. Legal correspondence. Her stomach tightened. The date. 3 months ago. Her heart started to beat faster as she opened the attachment. A draft. Formal language. Cold. Precise. Preliminary separation agreement. Her vision blurred for a second. No, that didn't make sense. They weren't separating 3 months ago. 3 months ago, they were still... She stopped herself. Were they? Her fingers scrolled faster now. More emails. More documents. Each one dated before the night she left. Before the argument. Before the sentence that broke everything. This has been carefully reviewed in anticipation of potential domestic complications. Ilara's breath caught. Anticipation. He didn't react to something that happened. He prepared for it. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened another file. Custody considerations, financial structuring, language that painted a picture she didn't recognize. A woman emotionally unstable. A household environment increasingly unpredictable. Her. That was how he was describing her, before she even walked out. Before she even knew something was wrong. A cold wave spread through her chest, because suddenly, nothing about that night felt spontaneous anymore. Not his words, not his tone, not even his timing. It wasn't a breaking point. It was a trigger. Something designed to push her. Just enough. Ilara slowly set the iPad down on her lap, her breathing shallow now, controlled. Because panic wouldn't help. Not anymore. Her eyes moved to the bassinet beside her. Her daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the storm unfolding just inches away. Ilara reached over, placing her hand gently against the baby's side. Warm, real, untouched by any of this. That grounded her, brought her back. Because whatever Marcus had planned, whatever version of the story he had built, he hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to see it, to understand it, to connect the pieces. Her gaze shifted back to the screen, to the documents, to the timeline that no longer made sense. 3 months, at least. That's how long he had been preparing. Which meant this wasn't about losing control, it was about controlling the outcome. From the beginning. Ilara leaned back slowly, her mind sharper now than it had been in days. Not emotional, not reactive, clear. Because now she finally understood something that changed everything. Marcus didn't just let her walk away. He needed her to. Marcus came back the next morning, earlier than expected, earlier than necessary. Alara noticed that immediately. He walked into the hospital room with a quiet confidence, dressed more casually this time, no suit jacket, just a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled slightly. He carried coffee in one hand, a small bag in the other. "Morning," he said gently, like nothing had changed. Like the night before didn't exist. Alara sat upright in the bed, her daughter resting in her arms, her eyes calm but watching. "Hi," she replied. Marcus placed the coffee on the table beside her. "I got you what you like. Oat milk, no sugar." The detail was precise, familiar, careful. She hesitated, then took the cup. "Thank you." He smiled faintly, like that small moment meant something more. "I stayed up thinking," he said, pulling the chair closer. "About everything?" Alara didn't respond. She let him continue. "I was wrong," Marcus added, his voice quieter now. "About what I said. About how I handled things. I shouldn't have made you feel alone." The words landed well. Too well. Because they were exactly what she needed to hear. Exactly what anyone would want to hear. And her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "You didn't just make me feel alone," she said. "You left me alone." Marcus nodded, accepting it. "I know," he said. "And I hate that I did that." Hate. Another strong word. Used carefully. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I want to be here now," he said. "For you. For her." His eyes shifted to the baby. Soft. Focused. Real. Ilara watched him closely, searching, trying to separate truth from performance. "Can I hold her again?" he asked. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then nodded. Marcus took the baby gently, more confident this time, supporting her carefully, his movements slower, more intentional. He looked different, more present, more grounded. And that scared her, because it made everything harder. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The room felt almost peaceful, like a version of something that could have worked, like a version of them that still existed somewhere. Marcus smiled faintly as the baby stirred in his arms. "She has your eyes," he said. Alara felt something shift in her chest, a small crack, a dangerous one, because hope didn't come back loudly. It came quietly, like this, in moments that felt real enough to trust. "I've been thinking about names," Marcus added. "We could still decide together." "We." Again. Alara looked at him, at the man she had loved, at the man who had planned behind her back, and for just a moment, she almost let herself forget, almost believed this was real, that maybe people could change quickly, that maybe pain could be undone just by saying the right things. But then, her mind went back to the iPad, to the documents, to the dates, to the plan, and the feeling disappeared, not slowly, instantly, like something switched off. "Marcus," she said quietly. He looked up. "I already named her." A pause. His expression shifted slightly. "What is it?" "Elena," she said. "Elena Quinn. Not Bennett. Not Hale. Not his. Just hers." Marcus blinked. Just once. But it was enough. Because in that moment, he understood something had changed. Something he couldn't smooth over. Something he couldn't control with tone or timing. And as he looked down at the baby in his arms, he realized for the first time, this wasn't a situation he could manage. It was something he was already losing. Alara held his gaze, steady now, because she wasn't confused anymore, and she wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. And Marcus felt it. That shift, that distance, that quiet line being drawn. Because even though he was sitting right there, even though she hadn't pushed him away, he could feel it. Something was gone, something final, And deep down, he knew exactly when it happened. Not when she left, but when she stopped believing him. The envelope arrived 2 days later. It wasn't dramatic. No knock in the middle of the night. No confrontation. No raised voices. Just a quiet delivery at the front desk. Talia walked into the hospital room holding it, her expression already tight. "This came for you," she said. Ilara looked at the envelope without touching it. Cream-colored, thick, official. Her name printed cleanly across the front. Ilara Quinn. Not Mrs. Not anything else. Just her. That alone felt intentional. "Who's it from?" she asked quietly. Talia didn't answer right away. She just handed it over. Ilara felt the weight of it the moment it touched her hands. Heavy, important, final. Her fingers hesitated for just a second before opening it. Inside, documents. Pages of them. Legal language. Precise. Cold. Her eyes scanned quickly, her breath slowing instead of speeding up. Because panic wasn't useful anymore. Understanding was. Temporary custody arrangement. The words hit first, then the rest followed. Concerns regarding maternal emotional stability. Recommendation for primary custodial authority. Ilara blinked. Once. Twice. Making sure she wasn't misreading. But she wasn't. This was real. Marcus wasn't asking. He was positioning. Her hand tightened around the paper. "He's filing for custody," she said quietly. Talia's jaw clenched. "Already?" Ilara nodded slowly. "He's saying I'm unstable," she continued, her voice still calm. "That I left without reason. That I'm not in a position to provide a consistent environment." The words sounded clinical, professional, carefully chosen, and completely detached from reality. Talia stepped closer. "That's insane." "No." Ilara shook her head slightly. "It's strategic." Because now it made sense. The emails, the preparation, the narrative. This wasn't about reaction. This was execution. Her eyes moved further down the page. And then, she saw it. A proposed agreement, outlined clearly. If she signed, Marcus would retain primary decision-making authority, financial control, residential stability, and she would receive support. Supervised visitation. Supervised. Ilara's chest tightened. Not from fear, from clarity. Because suddenly, every piece fell into place. The kindness, the apology, the coffee, the soft voice. And it wasn't about reconciliation, it was about compliance. Did she sign anything yet? The message echoed again. Now louder. Now undeniable. Talia crossed her arms. "You're not signing that." Ilara didn't answer right away. She just looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her. Small, perfect, unaware. Then she looked back at the papers, at the version of herself Marcus had created. Fragile, unstable, unfit. A woman who couldn't handle her own life. Ilara exhaled slowly. "No," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. "I'm not." Talia nodded once. Firm. Good. Silence filled the room again, but it felt different now. Not uncertain, not confused, focused. Because this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It wasn't even just about betrayal. It was about something bigger. Control, power, narrative. And for the first time, Ilara wasn't reacting to it. She was seeing it, clearly, completely. Her fingers smoothed the edges of the document before placing it carefully back into the envelope. Not crumpled, not thrown away, handled, like evidence. Because that's what it was now. Proof of who Marcus really was, and what he was willing to do. Ilara leaned back slightly, her eyes steady, her mind already moving ahead. Planning. Quietly. Carefully, just like he had. Because if Marcus thought this was a situation he could control, he had made one mistake, a critical one. He assumed she would break, but instead, he had just given her something far more dangerous, a reason to fight. And as Alara reached for her phone, not to call him, but to start thinking 2 steps ahead, she realized something that changed everything. And this wasn't where she lost her child. This was where he lost his advantage. Arthur Klein didn't look impressed. That was the first thing Alara noticed. He sat across from her in a small, quiet office in Lower Manhattan, glasses low on his nose, an old iPad resting beside a stack of printed documents. The room smelled faintly of paper and coffee, nothing like the polished boardrooms Marcus was used to. Arthur flipped through the custody papers slowly. No reaction, no interruption, just reading. Alara sat still, her hands folded in her lap, Elena asleep in a carrier beside her. Talia leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Finally, Arthur set the papers down. "Well?" he said calmly. "This isn't about concern." Alara exhaled quietly. "I didn't think it was." Arthur looked up at her, studying her face, not with sympathy, but with precision. "This is positioning," he continued. "He's not responding to a problem. He's establishing control before one can be argued." Talia let out a small scoff. "So he's lying?" Arthur shook his head slightly. "Not exactly. He's reframing." That word landed differently, because it felt more dangerous than a lie. Alara leaned forward slightly. "What does that mean for me?" Arthur folded his hands. "It means he's already built a version of you that the court might believe, if you don't challenge it." Silence. Heavy. Real. Alara glanced down at her daughter for a moment, then back up. "He started this before I left," she said quietly. Arthur nodded once. "I can tell." That didn't surprise him, that scared her. "How?" she asked. Arthur tapped the document lightly. "Timing, language, consistency. This wasn't drafted in panic, and it was prepared in advance." Alara's chest tightened slightly. Hearing it confirmed made it heavier, more real. "So what do I do?" she asked. Arthur leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "You don't react emotionally," he said. "You respond structurally." Alara frowned slightly. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Arthur continued. "You stop playing the role he's assigned you." Talia shifted beside the wall. "And what role is that?" Arthur didn't hesitate. "The unstable one." The word hung in the air. Sharp. Intentional. Alara felt it, but it didn't shake her. Not anymore. Arthur picked up the envelope again, holding it lightly between his fingers. "He expects you to panic," he added. "To argue. To defend yourself emotionally." Alara nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I wanted to do," she admitted. Arthur gave a small, almost approving nod. "Good," he said. "Don't." A pause. Then, "You document everything," he continued. "Every message, every visit, every inconsistency in his behavior." Ilara listened carefully now, focused, present. "Because in situations like this," Arthur added, "the person who stays consistent wins." That sentence landed deeper than anything else. Consistency. Not volume, not emotion, not desperation. Control. But a different kind. Alara sat back slightly, her mind already shifting, adjusting. Because this wasn't about fixing what broke. It was about proving what was true. Arthur watched her closely for a moment. Then he spoke again. "You're not the problem in this situation," he said calmly. Ilara held his gaze. "I know," she replied. And for the first time, she meant it. Arthur nodded once, satisfied. "Good," he said. Then he leaned forward slightly, his tone quieter now. "Because the moment you start believing his version of you..." He paused. Just long enough, then finished. You've already lost. Silence settled in the room again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was sharp, clear, directed. Alara looked down at her daughter, then back at the papers on the table. Not as something overwhelming, but as something she could understand, handle, challenge. Because now, she wasn't alone. And more importantly, she wasn't confused anymore. She reached forward slowly, pulling the documents closer to her side, not rejecting them, not fearing them, owning them. Because this wasn't just a legal fight, it was something deeper, a battle over truth. And as Alara lifted her head again, her voice steady, her eyes clear, she realized something that changed everything. Marcus didn't just start a case against her, he gave her the chance to expose him. Alara didn't expect Serena to agree to meet, but she did. The cafe in Tribeca was quiet, understated. Nothing flashy, just clean lines, soft lighting, and the low hum of conversations that didn't want to be overheard. Alara arrived early, Elena asleep in her stroller beside her, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in front of her. She wasn't nervous. She was prepared. Serena walked in 10 minutes later, confident, composed, exactly as Alara remembered. She spotted Alara immediately and approached without hesitation, setting her phone down on the table as she sat. "You look better than I expected," Serena said calmly. Alara didn't react to the comment. "Thanks for coming," she replied. Serena gave a small nod. "I figured this conversation was coming eventually." Straight to it. No pretending. No confusion. Good. Alara folded her hands lightly. "Then I won't waste time." Serena leaned back slightly, watching her. "You won't," she said. A brief silence passed between them. Measured. Intentional. "Alara," Serena continued, her tone even. "Whatever you think this is, it's not what you imagine." Alara met her gaze. "I'm not here to accuse you," she said. That made Serena pause. Just slightly. "I'm here because I know Marcus was planning something," Alara continued. "And I think you knew more than I did." Another silence. This one heavier. Serena's eyes shifted briefly toward the stroller, then back to Alara. "I knew enough," she admitted. That was it. No denial. No deflection. Just truth. Alara felt something tighten in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Was it just about custody?" she asked. Serena shook her head slowly. "No." One word, but it changed everything. Alara leaned forward slightly. "Then what?" Serena studied her for a moment, like she was deciding how much to say. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, unlocked it. "There are things you weren't supposed to find out yet," she said quietly. Alara's breath slowed. Focused. "Like what?" Serena turned the phone slightly, showing her a series of emails, numbers, transfers, entities Alara didn't recognize. "This isn't about your marriage," Serena said. "Not really." Alara frowned. "Then what is it about?" Serena held her gaze. "Money." The word landed hard, sharp, unexpected. "Marcus has been moving funds," she continued. "A lot of them. In quietly, through layered accounts and shell structures." Alara stared at the screen, trying to process. "How much?" she asked. Serena didn't hesitate. 15 million. The number didn't feel real, it felt distant. Until Serena added, "And part of it is tied to you." Alara blinked. "What?" Serena nodded once. "Not directly, but legally?" "Yes." The world seemed to narrow for a second. Just that table, that moment, that truth. "Why would he do that?" Alara asked. Serena's expression didn't change. "Because if anything went wrong," she said, "you'd take the fall." Silence. Complete. Alara felt it settle. Every piece, every plan, every word Marcus had said. It wasn't just about control, it was about protection. His protection. At her expense. Serena leaned back slightly, her voice quieter now. I didn't know how far he'd go, she admitted. But I knew enough to step away. Alara nodded slowly, not in agreement, in understanding, because now, this wasn't just personal, it was strategic, legal, dangerous. And as she looked at Serena, at the woman who had seen parts of Marcus she hadn't, Alara realized something that shifted everything again. This wasn't just a broken marriage, it was a setup. And she had been at the center of it, without even knowing. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table, steady, grounded. Because now, she finally understood the scale of it, and more importantly, the risk. Alara lifted her gaze again, calm but sharper than before. Then I need to know everything, she said. Serena held her eyes for a long second, then nodded. Because deep down, they both knew something had just changed. This wasn't about what Marcus did anymore. It was about what he was about to lose. Alara didn't speak for a long time after Serena finished. The cafe noise returned slowly, cups clinking, quiet laughter, the low hum of espresso machines. But it felt distant, like it belonged to another world. $15 million, hidden, layered, and somehow connected to her. That doesn't make sense, Alara said finally, her voice steady but low. I've never signed anything like that. Serena shook her head. You don't need to. That's the point. Alara frowned slightly. Then how? He used your name in the structure, Serena interrupted. Indirectly, through a trust layer. The words sounded technical, but the meaning was simple. Alara wasn't just uninvolved. She was being used. As a shield, Serena added quietly. If anything gets flagged, it doesn't trace back to him first. A cold wave spread through Alara's chest. Not panic, not fear. Recognition. Because now, everything fit. The urgency, the documents, the custody push. He needs me to look unstable, Alara said slowly, so anything tied to me doesn't get questioned. Serena nodded once. Exactly. Silence fell between them again, but this time, it wasn't confusion, it was clarity. Alara looked down at her hands, resting calmly on the table. 3 days ago, they would have been shaking. Now, they were still. What happens if I don't cooperate? She asked. Serena held her gaze. Then he loses control of the narrative, she said. And eventually, the money. The word loses lingered, because Marcus wasn't a man who lost easily, which meant he wouldn't stop. Alara leaned back slightly, her mind shifting, recalculating everything she thought she understood. This wasn't just about custody. It wasn't even just about reputation. It was about risk, legal risk, financial exposure. And Marcus had already positioned her as the weak point, the one most likely to break, the one least likely to fight back. Serena watched her closely. You didn't know, she said. Not a question, a statement. Alara met her eyes. No, she replied. A pause. Then, but he assumed I wouldn't find out. Something changed in Serena's expression. Subtle, but real, because that wasn't the response she expected. Alara reached for her coffee, taking a small sip, even though it had gone cold. She didn't react to the taste, didn't flinch, because something inside her had already shifted far beyond discomfort. This wasn't survival anymore. This was awareness. And awareness changed everything. If I'm tied to it, Alara said slowly, then I'm not just a liability. Serena didn't speak. She didn't need to. Alara's eyes sharpened slightly. I'm leverage. The word landed. Clean, accurate, and dangerous. Because for the first time, Alara wasn't looking at the situation as something happening to her. She was seeing where she stood inside it, at the center. Serena leaned back slightly, studying her. "You're not reacting the way I thought you would," she admitted. Alara gave a faint, almost distant smile. "I already had my breakdown," she said quietly. A beat. Then, "This part is different." Because now, she wasn't overwhelmed. She was thinking, strategically, calmly, the same way Marcus had, but without deception, without manipulation, just truth. Alara stood slowly, adjusting the stroller beside her, making sure Elena was still sleeping peacefully. Then she looked back at Serena one last time. "Send me everything you have," she said. Serena nodded. No hesitation this time, because she understood. This wasn't a woman falling apart. This was a woman waking up. And as Ilara stepped out of the cafe into the cool afternoon air, the city suddenly felt different. Sharper. Clearer. Because now, she wasn't just protecting her child. She was holding something Marcus never expected her to have. Control. And deep down, she realized something that changed the entire game. He didn't just hide $15 million. He hid it behind the one person who could destroy him. The first thing Alara did when she got back to Brooklyn wasn't cry. It wasn't call Marcus. It wasn't even think about what he might do next. She opened a laptop. Talia watched from the kitchen as Alara sat at the small dining table, her posture straight, her movements calm. The MacBook Pro wasn't hers, it was Talia's, but Alara handled it like it belonged to her now. Like this moment belonged to her. "You sure you want to do this tonight?" Talia asked gently. Alara didn't look up. Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. Because something had already shifted inside her. The fear was gone, not because the situation was less dangerous, but because she finally understood it. Elena slept quietly in the stroller beside her, wrapped in a soft blanket, completely unaware of the transformation happening just inches away. Ilara opened the files Serena had sent. Emails, transaction records, account structures. At first glance, it looked overwhelming. But Alara didn't rush. She read slowly, carefully, piece by piece, like she was rebuilding a story that had been hidden from her. Layered transfers, she murmured under her breath. Talia leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You understand that stuff?" Alara nodded slightly. "I used to manage operations," she said. "Different industry, same logic. Money always left patterns. You just had to look long enough." Her eyes moved across the screen, catching inconsistencies, repetitions, connections. And then, she saw it. A name, not hers, but tied to her. A trust. Registered months ago. Her breath slowed. Not in shock, in recognition. "That's it," she said quietly. Talia stepped closer. "What?" Alara pointed at the screen. "He didn't just hide the money," she explained. "He buried it under layers and placed me at the center." Talia frowned. "So what does that mean?" Alara leaned back slightly, her fingers still resting on the keyboard. "It means," she said slowly, "if this structure gets exposed, I'm the first person they look at." A pause. Then, "But I'm also the one who can trace it." Silence filled the room, heavy, focused, because that changed everything. Talia let out a quiet breath. "So you're not trapped?" Alara shook her head. "No," she said. A small pause. Then, "I'm positioned." The words settled differently, stronger, more intentional. Alara turned back to the screen, opening another document, her movements sharper now, more precise. She wasn't searching anymore. She was mapping, understanding. Taking control of something Marcus never expected her to touch, because he never expected her to look, never expected her to question, never expected her to learn. But she was, and quickly. Arthur was right, Alara said quietly. About what? Talia asked. Alara didn't look away from the screen. The person who stays consistent wins. And for the first time, she understood what consistency really meant. Not just staying calm, not just holding ground, but moving forward with intention. Without emotion clouding the direction, without fear slowing the pace. Alara closed one file, opened another, her eyes sharper now, clearer. Because this wasn't about reacting anymore, it was about building something back. Piece by piece, truth by truth. And somewhere across the city, Marcus was still operating under one assumption, that she was overwhelmed, unstable, out of control. Alara almost smiled at the thought, because he hadn't seen this version of her yet, the one who didn't panic, didn't break, didn't run. You're the one who stayed, learned, adapted. And as the screen reflected faintly in her eyes, numbers, names, connections forming a picture bigger than she expected, Alara realized something that changed everything again. She wasn't the weakness in his plan. She was the flaw he never accounted for. Marcus noticed it before anyone said a word. It wasn't obvious. Not at first. Just small things. A delayed response from a client. A meeting rescheduled without explanation. A subtle shift in tone during a boardroom discussion in Midtown. Polite, but distant. Controlled. Measured. Different. He sat at the long glass table, his iPad open in front of him, fingers resting still as someone across the room continued presenting numbers he wasn't really hearing. Because something felt off. And Marcus trusted that instinct. Always had. After the meeting, he walked out into the hallway, pulling his phone from his pocket. His reflection followed him in the mirrored walls. Sharp suit, steady posture, everything exactly where it should be. On the outside. But the silence from certain people, that wasn't normal. He scrolled through his messages. Nothing urgent. Nothing direct. Which made it worse. Because silence in his world didn't mean nothing. It meant something was being discussed elsewhere. Without him. Marcus stopped walking. A thought crossed his mind. Quick. Unwelcome. Alara. He dismissed it almost immediately. No, she didn't have the reach. Didn't have the access. Didn't have the understanding. That's what he believed. That's what he had planned around. Still. He opened his email. Scrolled. Then froze. One thread stood out. A flagged message from internal compliance. Subject line, clarification request, account structure review. His jaw tightened. Just slightly, he opened it. Carefully, slowly. We've identified certain irregular patterns within layered transfers tied to secondary entities. Marcus's eyes moved faster now. Scanning. Processing. Requesting clarification on authorization pathways. Authorization. That word hit harder than it should have, because it pointed to something specific. Something controlled. Something he had structured personally. His fingers hovered over the screen. Still. Focused. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was attention. And attention was dangerous. He leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. Calm. Stay calm. That was always step one. Marcus typed a response quickly. Professional. Neutral. Happy to clarify. Please specify which accounts you're referencing. Send. Then he waited. Not long. The reply came faster than expected. Too fast. As if they were already watching. Git. Attached preliminary references. Marcus opened the attachment. And that's when he saw it. A name. Buried in the structure, but visible. Clear. Alara Quinn. His chest tightened, not panic. Not yet. But something close. Because that wasn't supposed to surface. Not this early. Not like this. His mind moved quickly now, tracing back steps, connections, possible leaks. Serena? No, she didn't have full access. Not everything. Then how? Marcus stopped. A new thought forming. Slower, heavier, more dangerous. Alara. Not the version he described. Not the version he built. The real one. The one who noticed things. Who understood systems. Who didn't react the way he expected. His grip on the phone tightened slightly. Because suddenly, this wasn't a situation he could manage quietly. It was something unfolding. Something shifting beyond his control. Marcus looked down at the screen again. At her name. At the structure. At the crack forming in something he had built carefully over months. And for the first time, he felt it. Not fear. Not yet. But pressure. Real pressure. Because if someone started pulling at this thread, everything connected to it could unravel. And the one person at the center of it was no longer where he left her. She wasn't silent. She wasn't confused. She wasn't gone. Marcus straightened slowly, his expression tightening just enough to show what he was thinking now. Recalculation, adjustment, damage control. But deep down, he already knew something had changed. Yet because the plan he trusted, the one built on precision and timing, had one flaw he never corrected. He underestimated her, and as he closed the email, his reflection staring back at him again, perfect on the surface, shifting underneath. Marcus realized something he couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just a crack in his system. It was the beginning of everything coming apart. Julian Cross didn't look like a man who carried secrets. That was the first thing Alara noticed. He sat across from her in a quiet corner of a midtown cafe, dressed simply, no luxury watch, no sharp edges. Just a man who had spent years watching other people make dangerous decisions and survive them, or not. "You're earlier than I expected," he said, glancing at his watch briefly. "I didn't want to give myself time to second-guess this," Alara replied. Julian gave a small nod. "That's usually when people make the right decisions," he said. "No small talk, no wasted time." "Good." Ilara leaned forward slightly. "Serena said you used to work with Marcus." Julian's expression didn't change. "I did," he confirmed, "long enough to understand how he thinks. That mattered, more than anything." "Then you know what he's doing," Ilara said. Julian studied her for a moment, not her words, her tone, her control. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said. "And more importantly, I know what he was planning." The word was past tense. Was. Alara felt that immediately. "What do you mean?" she asked. Julian exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Marcus doesn't react to problems," he said. "He designs outcomes." Alara's chest tightened slightly, because she already knew that. But hearing it confirmed made it heavier. Real. "He saw the pregnancy as a variable," Julian continued. "Not a life event." The words landed hard, cold, clinical. "Alara, he was preparing to separate from you long before you left," Julian added. "I know," she said quietly. "I saw the documents." Julian nodded. "Then you probably didn't see the part where he planned to make it look like your decision." Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Alara didn't move, because something inside her already knew this was coming. "Say it," she said. Julian held her gaze. "He needed you to walk away," he said. "Voluntarily, emotionally, publicly." Every word hit its mark, because it matched everything she had lived through. The argument, the sentence, the push. "That night," Alara whispered. Julian nodded once. "That wasn't a loss of control," he said. "That was a trigger." Alara's fingers curled slightly against the table. Not shaking, just steady. Because now, there was no doubt left. He wanted me gone, she said. Julian leaned forward slightly. He wanted you gone in a way that benefited him, he corrected. A pause. Then, and once the baby was born, he planned to move quickly. Legal structure, custody positioning, financial protection. Alara's breath slowed, focused. And if I stayed? She asked. Julian didn't hesitate. Then he would have escalated the pressure until you couldn't. The truth wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. That made it worse. Because it was precise, calculated, real. Alara leaned back slowly, her mind connecting every piece. The timeline, the words, the documents, the silence. It all fit. Too well. Julian watched her carefully. You're handling this better than most people would, he said. Alara gave a faint, almost distant smile. I don't have the option not to, she replied. Because now, this wasn't about understanding Marcus. It was about outmaneuvering him. Julian nodded once, like that answer told him everything he needed to know. Then he spoke again. There's one more thing you should understand, he said. Alara looked up. What? Julian's expression didn't change, but his voice lowered slightly. Marcus only loses when the variables stop behaving the way he expects. A beat. Then. You're his biggest variable. Silence settled between them, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt sharp, focused, directed. Because now, Alara wasn't guessing. She wasn't reacting. She wasn't trying to survive. She was playing the same game, but differently, without lies. Without manipulation, just truth. And that made her more dangerous than Marcus ever anticipated. Alara stood slowly, reaching for her bag. Thank you, she said. Julian nodded, but as she turned to leave, he added one final sentence. Calm, certain, unavoidable. He already thinks he knows how this ends. Alara paused, just for a second, then continued walking. Because deep down, she realized something he hadn't. This time, he didn't write the ending. Marcus didn't call that night. That alone told Alara everything. Because Marcus always called when he believed he still had control. Silence, in his world, meant calculation, not absence. Alara sat at the small dining table in Talia's apartment, her laptop open, the soft glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Elena slept peacefully nearby, the steady rhythm of her breathing grounding everything around her. Across the screen, documents, connections, proof. And now, something more dangerous than evidence. Understanding. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Alara stared at it for a second before answering. Hello? A pause. Then, Ilara. Marcus. His voice was calm. Too calm. I figured you'd call from a different number, she said quietly. I figured you wouldn't answer mine, he replied. No emotion. Just precision. Ilara leaned back slightly in her chair. What do you want, Marcus? A brief silence, then, we need to talk. Not, I want to see you. Not, how are you? Just, talk. Ilara almost smiled. About what? She asked. Another pause. Longer this time. About things that are starting to complicate, he said. Complicate. There it was again. The careful language. And the controlled tone. But something underneath it had shifted. Pressure. Alara tapped her finger lightly against the table. You mean the accounts? She asked. Silence. Total. Absolute. And in that silence, she heard it. The crack. Small, but real. You've been looking into things you don't fully understand, Marcus said finally, his voice lower now. Not angry. Not yet. But no longer smooth. Alara's gaze stayed steady. I understand enough, she replied. That's the problem, he said. A beat. Then, you weren't supposed to. There it was. The truth. Not hidden. Not softened. Just said. Alara let the words settle, because they mattered, more than anything else he had told her. Neither was I supposed to leave, right? She asked. Marcus didn't answer, because he couldn't, and that told her everything. Alara stood slowly, walking toward the window, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. You built this carefully? She continued. The timing, the documents, the narrative. Her voice didn't shake, didn't rise. It didn't need to. Marcus exhaled on the other end of the line. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said. Ilara almost laughed, not out loud, but inside, because for the first time, that sentence didn't intimidate her. It revealed him. What happens if I don't cooperate? She asked. Silence again, but this time, different, heavier. Then, you don't want to find out, Marcus said. There it was, the closest thing to a threat he had allowed himself to say. Careful, measured, but real. Alara closed her eyes for just a second. Not in fear, in clarity. Because now, there was nothing left to guess. Nothing left to wonder. Everything was exactly what it looked like. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't the same person who walked out of that apartment. I already did, she said quietly. A pause. Marcus didn't respond, because he understood what she meant. She had already lost the illusion, already seen the truth, already stepped out of his control. And there was no way to reverse that. Alara tightened her grip on the phone slightly, not out of anger, but resolve. You built your plan assuming I wouldn't see it, she said. That I wouldn't understand it. A breath. Then, that was your mistake. Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Final. Because for the first time, Marcus didn't have the next move. Alara ended the call. Not abruptly, not dramatically. Just done. She stood there for a moment, staring out at the city, then turned back toward the table. Yes, toward the laptop. Toward the life she was rebuilding. On her terms. Because now, there was no fear left. No confusion, no hesitation. Only direction. And as Alara sat back down, her fingers moving calmly across the keyboard, she realized something that Marcus was only just beginning to understand. He didn't just lose control of the situation, he lost control of her. Marcus didn't wait long. 2 days later, he showed up in person. No warning, no message, just presence. Talia opened the door first, her body immediately blocking the entrance, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You don't just walk in here, she said. Marcus didn't argue, didn't push. He just stood there, calm as ever, hands in his coat pockets. I'm not here for you, he replied evenly. I'm here for Alara. Talia didn't move. Behind her, Alara stepped into view, Elena resting quietly against her shoulder. Let him in, she said. Talia hesitated, then stepped aside. Marcus walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the small apartment. Simple. Quiet. Nothing like the world he was used to controlling. His gaze settled on Alara, and for the first time, something in his expression faltered. Not because she looked weak, but because she didn't. You look different, he said. Alara shifted Elena slightly, her posture steady. I am. No softness, no hesitation, just truth. Marcus nodded once, absorbing it. Then he got straight to it. You've been accessing things that don't concern you, he said. Alara met his eyes. They concern me now. A pause. Tension filled the room, thick and immediate. Marcus took a step closer, lowered his voice. You don't understand the consequences of what you're doing. Alara didn't move, didn't step back, didn't react. I understand enough, she replied calmly. That's when it happened. A shift. Subtle, but undeniable. Marcus's jaw tightened. His control, perfect calculated control, cracked. Just slightly, but it was there. You're putting yourself in a position you can't recover from, he said, his voice sharper now. Talia watched from the side, silent but ready. Ilara adjusted her grip on Elena, her movements slow, deliberate. You already did that, she said. Marcus froze, just for a second. Then, what does that mean? He asked. Ilara stepped closer now, not aggressively, but intentionally. You built a plan, she said. You positioned me as unstable. You tied me to financial structures I didn't know existed. Her voice remained even, measured, controlled. And now you're telling me I'm the one in danger? Silence. Heavy. Marcus looked at her. Really looked this time. And something clicked. Not fear. Recognition. Because this wasn't the woman who left his apartment. This wasn't the woman who cried in the hospital. This was someone else. Someone he hadn't accounted for. You think you have leverage? He said slowly. Ilara didn't answer, because she didn't need to. He could see it. In her eyes. In her stillness. In the way she wasn't reacting the way he expected. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, something he hadn't done before in front of her. Not like this. Uncontrolled. Frustrated. This isn't a game you can win, he said. And there it was. Not calm, not strategic. Personal. Ilara tilted her head slightly. I'm not trying to win, she said. A pause. Then, I'm making sure you don't. That hit. Harder than anything else, because it stripped away the illusion. Marcus exhaled sharply, turning away for a second, pacing once across the small space. He wasn't used to this. Not being heard, not being followed, not being obeyed. When he turned back, his expression had changed. Less controlled, more exposed. You're making a mistake, he said. Ilara held his gaze, steady, unshaken. No, she replied quietly. A beat. Then, I stopped doing that when I walked out. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't his, it was hers. Marcus stood there for a long moment, saying nothing. Because for the first time, he didn't have a move, and he knew it. Slowly he stepped back, toward the door, not defeated, but not in control either. Something in between, something unfamiliar. And as he reached for the handle, he paused. Just for a second. Without turning back, he said one final sentence. You have no idea what you've started. Ilara didn't respond, because she did. And as the door closed behind him, quiet, final, she looked down at her daughter, then back up again. Calm, clear, certain. Because now, there was no doubt left. No illusion, no fear, only truth. And the man who built everything on control had just lost it. Not in the boardroom, not in court, but right here, standing in front of the one person who refused to break. Marcus didn't see it coming. Not fully. He saw pressure. He saw risk. But he didn't see collapse. That was his mistake. Because by the time the second email arrived from compliance, it wasn't a request anymore. It was an escalation. Marcus sat alone in his office, in the skyline stretching behind him, untouched, indifferent. His iPhone rested face down on the desk, but the MacBook Pro in front of him held his full attention. The subject line was different this time. Immediate review, authorization irregularities. Immediate. That word didn't exist in his world unless something had already gone wrong. He opened it. Faster than before. We require full disclosure regarding account ownership pathways. Third-party linkage has been identified. Failure to clarify may result in formal investigation. Marcus's jaw tightened. This wasn't internal anymore. This was exposure. His mind moved quickly, calculating, adjusting, searching for the break in the system. Where did it leak? Serena? Unlikely. Julian? Possible. But then, He saw it again. The name. Clearer this time. Not buried. Not hidden. Alara Quinn. Attached. Flagged. Visible. His breath slowed. Not panic. Control. Force control. Because panic was what people did when they lost. Marcus didn't lose. He adapted. He reached for his phone, dialing quickly. "Get me legal," he said the moment someone answered. "Now." His voice was sharp, focused, urgent, but contained. He stood, pacing once across the room, his reflection catching briefly in the glass wall. Still composed, still put together. But underneath, the structure was shifting. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about traceability. And once something could be traced, it could be proven. The call connected. "We need to contain this," Marcus said immediately. "I want all references to secondary entities reviewed and—" "Marcus," the voice on the other end interrupted. Not his lawyer. Someone else. Ian Sr. Firm. "There's already been a request for documentation." Silence. Not long, but enough. Marcus stopped pacing. "What kind of request?" he asked. "You don't ask that question unless you already know the answer," the voice replied. And just like that, everything shifted. Because this wasn't internal pressure anymore, it was external attention, and that was uncontrollable. Marcus lowered the phone slowly, ending the call without another word. For the first time, he didn't have a solution ready, because this wasn't a variable he could manage quietly. This was a system reacting. And systems didn't negotiate. His gaze moved back to the screen, to the flagged name, to the connection he thought would protect him. Now pulling everything into the light. Alara, the one person he had positioned as the weakest link. Now the one point everything traced back to. Not as a shield, but as a spotlight. Marcus exhaled slowly, his hand tightening slightly against the desk. Because now, he understood. This wasn't just resistance. This was activation. Somewhere, something had been triggered. And it wasn't random. It was precise, intentional, timed. And he knew exactly who had done it. Across the city, Alara sat quietly in Arthur's office, Elena resting peacefully in her arms. The documents were already submitted. The structure already exposed. Not publicly, not recklessly, but strategically. Exactly the way Marcus would have done it, if he had been in her position. Arthur glanced at her once. "You're sure?" he asked. Alara nodded. No hesitation, because she understood now. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. She adjusted Elena's blanket gently, her movements soft, grounded. Because this wasn't about destroying Marcus. It was about stopping him. And as the city moved on outside, unaware of the shift happening beneath the surface, Alara realized something that made everything finally make sense. He didn't lose because she fought harder. He lost because she learned how he played, and then used it against him. Marcus didn't walk into the office that morning the same way. Not with confidence, not with control. But he still tried to look like he did. Same tailored suit, same measured steps, same calm expression that had carried him through years of negotiations, deals, and carefully constructed outcomes. But this time, people noticed. Not directly. No one stopped him. No one confronted him. But conversations paused when he passed. Eyes lingered a second too long, and then looked away. That was worse, because silence meant something had already spread. Marcus reached his office, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. He stood there for a moment, staring at the glass wall, his reflection staring back. Still perfect, still intact, but no longer convincing. His phone buzzed. A message from HR. "Please come by when you have a moment." A moment? Marcus almost laughed. There were no moments left. He walked down the hallway, each step quieter than usual, each second stretching longer than it should. When he entered the room, 3 people were already there. Not just HR legal. Compliance. That was enough. Marcus didn't sit immediately. "What's this about?" he asked, though he already knew. One of them gestured toward the chair. "Please." He sat. Calm, controlled. But inside, everything was shifting. "We've received formal inquiries regarding certain financial structures tied to your oversight," one of them began. Careful words, neutral tone, but the meaning was clear. "This is standard procedure," another added. "We just need clarity." Clarity. Marcus nodded slowly. "I've already responded to initial requests," he said. "Yes," the first voice replied, "but this has escalated." That word again. Escalated. Because now, it wasn't internal anymore. They slid a folder across the table. Marcus opened it, and there it was. Everything. The accounts, the transfers, the structure, and her name. Alara Quinn. Clear. Central. Unavoidable. Marcus's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the page. "Can you explain her involvement?" someone asked. That question landed harder than anything else, because for the first time, he didn't have a clean answer. Not one that worked in this room. Not one that protected him. Not one that erased what had already been seen. Silence stretched. Long. Uncomfortable. Real. "I'll need to review this in detail," Marcus said finally. Professional. Measured. But slower than before, and they noticed. "Of course," the voice replied, "but until then, we'll need you to step back from active files." Step back. A polite phrase, a controlled one, but the meaning was clear. Removal. Marcus nodded once. Didn't argue, didn't push, because he understood something now that he hadn't before. This wasn't a situation he could talk his way out of. It was already documented, already structured, already moving. Just like he used to do. The meeting ended quickly after that. No accusations, no final decisions. Just distance. And that was enough. Marcus walked back to his office slowly, the weight of everything settling in, not all at once, but piece by piece. Because this wasn't a collapse. It was erosion, reputation, authority, control. All slipping, quietly, irreversibly. Across the city, Alara sat by the window, Elena asleep in her arms, the afternoon light soft against her face. She wasn't watching the news, wasn't checking updates, wasn't waiting for anything, because she already knew. Not the details, not the timing, but the direction. And that was enough. She adjusted Elena gently, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Calm, grounded, free. Because this wasn't about watching him fall. It never was. It was about making sure he couldn't hurt her again. And as the city moved on, unaware of the quiet shift in power, Ilara realized something that brought a stillness she hadn't felt in months. He didn't lose everything at once. He lost it the moment the truth stopped being his to control. And this time, it wasn't coming back. The courtroom was quieter than Ilara expected. Not silent, just restrained. Like everyone inside understood this wasn't a place for drama, only decisions. Ilara sat at one side, Elena resting peacefully in her arms, her tiny fingers curled gently against the fabric of Ilara's sleeve. Talia sat just behind her, steady, present, saying nothing but offering everything. Across the room, Marcus. He looked the same at first glance. Suit pressed, posture straight, composed. But something was missing. Not visible to everyone, but unmistakable to Ilara. Control. The judge spoke calmly, reviewing documents, summarizing what had already been established over weeks of quiet, methodical process. Ilara Quinn has demonstrated consistent stability and primary caregiving. Concerns previously raised have not been substantiated. Custodial arrangement will reflect the child's best interest. Each sentence landed clearly, not loudly, but permanently. Marcus didn't interrupt, didn't object, didn't argue, because this wasn't a moment he could influence anymore. It was already decided. The outcome wasn't dramatic. No one gasped. No one reacted. But Ilara felt it. The shift. The final confirmation. Primary custody. Clear terms. Defined boundaries. Marcus would have visitation. Structured. Limited. Monitored. Not out of punishment, but necessity. Ilara didn't celebrate. Didn't smile. She just breathed. Deep. Slow. Like something she had been holding for months finally released. When the session ended, people began to stand, gathering papers, moving quietly toward the exit. Marcus didn't leave right away. He stayed seated, watching. Ilara noticed. Of course she did. After a moment, she stood, adjusting Elena carefully before walking toward the aisle. Marcus stepped forward then, not blocking her, just present. Ilara, he said. She stopped, turned, looked at him, not with anger, not with softness, just clarity. For a second, neither of them spoke, because there was nothing left to prove, nothing left to argue. I never thought it would end like this, Marcus said quietly. Ilara held his gaze. I did, she replied. A pause. Then, I just didn't know when. The truth of that settled between them. Heavy. Final. Marcus looked at Elena, his expression shifting slightly, something softer, something almost regretful. I didn't want to lose her, he said. Ilara's voice remained calm. You didn't lose her, she said. A beat. Then, you lost the right to decide for her. That hit, not loudly, but deeply, because it was true. Marcus exhaled slowly, looking down for a moment before meeting her eyes again. I would have done things differently, he said. Ilara didn't respond immediately, because that sentence, it came too late. I know, she said finally, and she meant it. Because now she understood him. Completely. That was the difference. Not love, not anger. Understanding. Marcus nodded once. No defense, no argument. Because for the first time, he didn't have one. Ilara adjusted Elena gently in her arms, then stepped past him. Not rushed, not hesitant. Just forward. And toward the door, toward the light spilling in from outside, toward something new. And as she walked out of that courtroom, she didn't feel like she had won. She didn't feel like he had lost. She felt something else, something quieter, something stronger. Freedom. Not from Marcus, not from the past, but from the weight of needing things to be different than they were. And as the doors closed behind her, Ilara realized something that made everything finally settle. She didn't walk away that night because she was broken. She walked away because somewhere deep inside, she already knew she deserved better than what he was willing to be. 1 year later, Ilara Quinn no longer checked her phone when it buzzed. Not immediately, not anxiously, just when she felt like it. The small boutique hotel in Connecticut carried her name quietly on a brass plaque near the entrance. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just simple, warm, intentional, like everything she had rebuilt. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows, catching soft linen curtains and polished wood floors. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh flowers, a calm that felt earned, not designed. Ilara stood behind the front desk, Elena balanced comfortably on her hip, now older, curious, her small fingers gripping the edge of her mother's blouse. Morning, a guest said with a smile as they checked out. Ilara returned it easily, natural, unforced, real. This life. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Her phone buzzed lightly on the desk. She glanced at it. Marcus. A message. Dropped off her birthday gift with the front office. Hope she likes it. Alara looked at the screen for a moment. No tension, no rush, just acknowledgement. Then she set the phone down. Not ignoring, not engaging, just choosing. Because now, she decided what mattered. Elena shifted in her arms, letting out a soft laugh, her attention caught by something outside the window. Ilara followed her gaze. A man stood near the garden entrance talking to one of the staff. Casual, relaxed. Nothing about him tried too hard. Daniel. He had come into her life slowly, introduced through Arthur months ago. No grand gestures, no overwhelming presence, just consistency, patience, kindness. The things she used to think were ordinary, but now knew were rare. He looked up, meeting her eyes, and smiled. Not claiming, not expecting. Just there. Ilara felt something steady settle in her chest. Not excitement. Not fear. Something better. Peace. She adjusted Elena gently, pressing a soft kiss to her daughter's temple before stepping out from behind the desk. Not toward a new life, but deeper into the one she had already built. Because that was the difference now. She wasn't searching anymore. She had arrived. As she walked toward the garden doors, the sunlight warming her face, Ilara thought back to that night. The apartment, the silence, the sentence that had ended everything. Back then it felt like loss, like something had been taken from her. But standing here now, she understood. Nothing had been taken. She had been released. From expectations. From control. From a version of love that required her to shrink. Daniel opened the door for her, stepping aside as she walked through, Elena reaching out toward the light, her laughter filling the quiet space. Ilara smiled. Not because everything had been easy, but because it had been worth it. Behind her. That life was gone. No anger. No regret. Just distance. And ahead, there was no promise of perfection. Only something real. Something chosen. Something steady. Ilara stepped fully into the sunlight, her daughter in her arms, her future no longer uncertain. Because in the end, she didn't need revenge. She didn't need closure from him. She didn't need the past to change. All she needed was the courage to walk away when it mattered, and the strength to keep going. And as the door closed softly behind her, sealing the past where it belonged, Ilara realized something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. She didn't lose everything that night. She lost the one thing that was holding her back from becoming everything she was meant to be. So, that's how the story ends. And if you're still here, still listening up to this moment, then maybe, just maybe, something in this story touched you in a quiet but real way. Let's take a breath together for a second. Because this wasn't just about Ilara, it was about something deeper. Something many people go through but rarely talk about. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is this. Not everyone who promises to love you is capable of doing it the right way. And like the Stoics say, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Ilara didn't win because she fought louder. She won because she stopped reacting and started seeing clearly. She chose self-respect over attachment, truth over illusion, and that's something we can all carry into our own lives. If you've ever felt overlooked, manipulated, or made to question your worth, remember this. Walking away is not weakness. It's clarity. It's strength. Now tell me, what part of this story stayed with you the most? If this meant something to you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this, they heal more than we realize. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, storytelling, and educational reflection. While it draws inspiration from real-life emotional experiences such as relationships, personal growth, and resilience, the characters, events, and situations portrayed are not intended to represent any specific real individuals or actual cases. The purpose of this content is to explore meaningful life lessons, such as self-respect, emotional clarity, and personal empowerment, through a dramatized storyline. Viewers are encouraged to interpret the message thoughtfully and apply only what resonates with their own life circumstances. This video does not provide legal, financial, or psychological advice, and any similarities to real persons or situations are purely coincidental.